Welcome to Aegis Mic Check, a podcast where we talk about all things that relate to personal finance. Hi everyone, I'm your host Amelia, and today I'm joined by Jakes and Weishen from Aegis Organisation. Aegis Organisation is an authorised representative of AIA Singapore Private Limited. In today's episode, we are going to talk about things to consider when buying a car in Singapore. Weishen and Jakes, let's start off with an easy question. In today's context, will you classify owning a car as a need or a want?
I take the question first. Hi, Weishen. I think for me, right, car is more of a need than a want. Then again, on the contrary, I feel that in today's context in Singapore, it's so accessible. We can get to everywhere or anywhere with MRT. I'm still struggling between whether is it a need or a want, but for me, it is a need because number one, my occupation. I'm in the sales line, so I have to meet my clients. I have to travel around very often. Number two, I have a car for my family because for easy transportation. I have a 6-year-old, so to transport a kid around, I think it's better to have our own car as opposed to having to take public transport frequently. So for me, it's a need. What about Jing Kai?
Hi, for me, right, similarly to Weishen, for need or want is very subjective. But personally, with regards to job, similarly in the sales line, right, having a car be more value in money-wise because we may be actually traveling very frequently. And I also have 2 kids, 11 and 6. While having the convenience by having a car, all these will then serve to become more of a need than a want. Of course, what type of car and all, then that is another topic of whether is it a need or want again.
So I get from the both of you that actually it's very subjective whether a car is a need or want, because in Singapore everything is actually pretty accessible. But for personal convenience and job scope, car is more suitable for you guys in terms of whether is it a need or want. So maybe we shift it over to the money sense of owning a car in Singapore. We all know that owning a car in Singapore is really expensive. So maybe can you tell me how much you spend on your car every month in terms of the fixed cost, like your petrol, your parking, and how much you spend each month on your car?
How much did I pay for my car first?
Okay, Ken.
For me, I think I'm quite fortunate. I bought it when COE is actually relatively reasonable. When I first bought this car 12 years ago, COE was only about 17,000. Total cost I paid for my car is about 75,000. So to me, I see my car as a tool of transport and I must make it work really hard for me. So I don't need to go for a luxury brand. And I think it being so-called useful is more important than it being nice. So 75,000, I spread it over 10 years, taking out the OMV. Maybe depreciation is about $6,000 to $7,000 a year. Fast forward 10 years later, COE was not very high as compared to today's COE pricing about 80,000 for a Cat B car. My car managed to renew 10 years COE for about $27,000. So then I spread it over 10 years again. It's about less than $3,000 a year in terms of depreciation. Now going back to the second part of your question related to how much fixed cost do I spend on the car on a monthly basis, I think averagely I will still set aside close to $1,000 for my vehicle. Then that question also goes back down to exactly how much do you drive in today's context, because mostly we are all working from home, so I don't drive that much now. I still visit some of my clients occasionally, and mostly it's for me to transport my family to places, and that actually reduces my petrol cost by a lot. Some sunk costs, right, is like parking, road tax, insurance, and maintenance. Those will not go. So averagely, I would say for petrol, I'm spending maybe $200-300 a month. Parking is a fixed rate of 110, not inclusive of parking elsewhere, and ERP, including maintenance. And all this adds up to averagely about $1,000.
And slightly different from Weishen. So for him, he may want the car to work like fully and totally for him. And in my case, of course, as time progressed, I start to think in a way that I probably want a car that has some wants in it. For my part, slightly higher because my petrol consumption is quite high. So it's about $400 to $500 I'm spending per month. Parking is about the same, 110. Insurance and road tax is a little more expensive. So on average, if I were to put it on a monthly basis, I'm spending about 2 to 2.2K per month. On my side, because as time passes by, I have this thought that if I'm in this line and I'm spending a good 60% of my time time in the car in a day, right? Then I probably want to drive something that I like, because there was once I actually bought a car and I drove it for 6 months, but I was quite unhappy. And then for some reason, I was just unhappy. So after 6 months, I just decided, okay, I'm going to change it. Of course, by doing some calculation to see whether it still makes sense or not saying that just blindly changing for the sake of changing. When monetary sense still reasonable, then of course I will make a change from there. But I will put some consideration into liking and driving the car to be comfortable and what I like.
Sounds like you spend a lot of time in your car.
Quite a fair bit.
Okay, so you all talked about the main cost and the very frequently heard about cost. What about hidden costs that, hey, there is this cost that you actually need to budget for when you own a car? What are these costs that you guys find that is hidden costs that you all would like to share with people?
I think for hidden costs, right, it comes with the age of your car and also the brand of your car. So for me, I'm driving a Honda. Things like, for example, in times of breakdown, wear and tear. So these are costs that is also part and parcel of owning the car, but usually people don't add into it. For example, my tire, because I drive a lot. So every 1 year or so, I have to change a new set of tires so as to be safe on the road. So that's one. Things like, for example, your wiper, you have to change, grooming of the car, so on and so forth. And I probably don't want to sit in a car that is dirty and not comfortable in. So I'll make sure my car is sent for grooming every 2 months and car wash every other week. To me, these are the hidden costs that is not usually talked about.
So Weishen, your car grooming is those like very entire package, or just going to the petrol kiosk and just like clean it down?
Every 2 weeks, I will go to the petrol station, do the car wash, cost about $10 to $12. Every 2 months, right, I'll do a proper polishing of the exterior and vacuuming of the interior. Because I'm driving a white car, I cannot accept a car that is not white. Although it's pearl white, it looks a little bit yellowish, but I must maintain that look there. I take a lot of pride driving my car. People saying that, hey, your 10-year-old car don't look like 10-year-old.
You see, I mean, it differs a lot. For Weishen, very prideful on the cleanliness and everything. So for me, interior-wise, similarly, I will clean almost like every week, self-vacuuming, or even just do a wipe down with some wet wipes or something. But exterior is something that I don't really care so much about. So I actually wash my car almost like 3 to 6 months once. So I don't do it like every 2 weeks. So for exteriors, actually, I hope it rains sometimes, so it can just help me clean off some of the dirt. Yeah, but interior-wise, then I'm quite mindful, probably having kids and all. Yeah, but back to the question in terms of hidden costs, right? For me, actually, I will check with the dealer, or even I will go to the usual workshop that I go to. So I'll ask them things like, for parts of this specific car, is it difficult to source? Because back to supply and demand, if it's difficult to source, then the price will be expensive because the workshop don't stock those parts and all. There was once my previous car that one part actually spoiled, and it took about 3 to 4 months to source for that part in order to replace it. So it will cost like about 600 to 700 for that just one part. Yeah, so these are some hidden costs apart from purchasing price and all that I will take into consideration. Like example, people often say BM may be very high maintenance, and also I will take all these into consideration.
I think Jakes brought up a very good point. Sorry. Yeah, that's also one of the biggest consideration when purchasing or choosing a type and model. I want to buy a car, right, that is more popular as opposed to one that is very, very rare or very unique. When it comes to parts, right, I want to make sure that it's easily replaceable and easily available. Otherwise, you have to wait for weeks or even months, right, for the parts to come. And probably during that period of time, you may have to drive the car with a lot of caution.
So I want to ask you guys about electric cars. Your cars are all petrol-based now, right? So
yes.
Would you in the future consider switching to an electric car? Is seeing that, so-called energy saving or cost saving? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that will be something really more for environmental basis. But if you come back to the main question of asking me about driving a car, then I may still prefer the current type of driving experience. For myself anyway, for all my cars that I own, I drive a manual car. I take the driving experience quite huge factor to decide what car to purchase and all, because driving manual, yes, it's a bit more tedious, but the control, personally, I will still prefer. But I drove before the SG Blue when I was waiting like in between or car spoil sometimes, then I'll rent those cars to drive. So it's really very easy to drive and very comfortable as well. And of course, maintenance wise, definitely will be much lower. It really depends. If thinking from environmental context wise, we have not much of a choice as well. Moving down the line, government is going to change everything to EV. But personally, I will still factor in experience of driving. So I will still prefer a petrol car.
To answer your question straight up is yes. Already in plans, saving out once my COE is nearing the end. I will change to EV lah.
Okay.
Tesla, depending, I'll see how the market moves in the next 5 years. Tesla is definitely one of my considerations. So now saving up, buying their shares, see which one give me the most profit. that will help me decide on which car to buy.
What do you think is a comfortable income range before you will advise somebody to buy a car? They say, hey, I want to buy a car, but I'm not sure if I can afford a car. What would be a comfortable income range, or how will you all go about helping this person determine whether or not they can afford a car?
It really depends on individual situation, background, capacity at that moment. So my first car was about 8 years ago when my first daughter was about 3 years old. So at that point of time, to be transparent, I wasn't doing very well. But I need a car because there was no one helping to take care of my girl that I have to send on a daily basis to my in-law house, which is quite far away. Of course, starting by some calculation to make sure that you are able to afford the monthly installment and taking into consideration like the maintenance. Actually, buying a car, again, it really depends because my first car, I still remember my installment was only about 400 odd only. And the initial down payment wasn't very high. It was like about 8 to 10,000. So, of course, I don't look for a new car at that point of time. I look for like second-hand those that are left with 2 to 3 years, that kind. So, really depend on how you need it or whether is it a want, which from there, I think you can better decide on the budgeting towards the car. Because if it's a want and you can afford, then probably you can cater more amount to it. But if it's a need and your ability wasn't so high, then you have to cater very specifically an amount within it. But I think in general, to purchase one is not difficult. The question always come back about maintaining and able to drive it and service or fulfill the installments and all this.
Buying something is very easy, but when it comes to maintenance, is the most difficult part. I think about 12 years ago, zero drive away is very popular. A lot of people just went on to just get the car. In return, right, they're actually paying a lot for the interest on the car loan. I think to be able to be very prudent with how much you set aside for insurance or buying the car, right, it's important to seek advice from your advisor. So then they will help you do up your sums and see whether or not you can afford. Rule of thumb for me is about 10 to 15% of your monthly income for the ease of finances, so as not to overstretch yourself. If you're going to take out more than that amount, then I think it's a little bit of a stretch for anyone to purchase a car. I think one key thing that I learned from someone I know many years back is always make the car a slave for you and not you become the slave for your car.
So then we move on to the next segment of this, which is previously when y'all started, y'all said that y'all buy a car because y'all need it for transport or for work, for your driving experience. So is there any other kind of advantage or benefits that the car bring you that people don't usually talk about?
I'm driving an MPV. It's 8-seater. It can fit up to 8 if you want to fully use it. But most of the time, it's only 1 or maximum 4 packs using the car. With an MPV, right, it comes with space. So when it comes to space, I can load up a lot of things. So for example, if I were to buy furniture at IKEA, most sedan car can't fit a cabinet. And if I fold out all my chairs, I can nicely fit the cabinet inside my vehicle. Sometimes when I have to shift things from point A to point B, I don't also have to worry about not having space because the boot is so big, I can do that. And at times, if I want to take a break in between going to places, I can comfortably rest inside the car.
Yeah, so apart from work, transport-wise, I think having a car with this privilege, definitely it will serve much more purpose comparing to taking public transport. I mean, small little things like, example, I bought something for the kids. I don't want to bring them home. I wanted to give them a surprise. I can keep in the car first before going home. Or even like previously, my grandma was wheelchair bound. So if I want to like bring her out for a walk or for dinner, having a car will be a lot more convenience because you will not know old people. They will reject going out not because of not having a car, but they will be concerned about she will be embarrassed. She don't want people to see her in wheelchair. Like my dad car breakdown and he need to go to work because my dad go to work quite early, 4 a.m. that kind. So I can then ask him to just use my car. And of course, I have a pet dog. Bringing a pet around in Singapore is not easy as well. So you can't take bus, take MRT. So yeah, sometimes bring them out and having a car then will be a lot easier and convenient.
Right.
I think my main point, end of the day, is about convenience and control. That's what I thought it will help most.
So I know you all say all those benefits of owning a car, but then these people will say, just get a flag down cab. You don't need to go buy parking. You don't need to pay for parking. And then whenever you want a car, it's there for you, waiting for you. You don't need to go and walk to your car. Cannot find a car, the car park, that kind of thing. So what will be your response to this school of thought, taking taxi as opposed to owning a car?
This this relates very well to one of my friends who recently just started doing Grab himself. I took the taxi license together with him and he started doing part-time Grab. So he was contemplating and have some discussion on whether should he purchase a car and go and do Grab or do a rental. And then after 3 months, he actually shared with me that luckily he rented a car and didn't purchase one, because in his line of work, you will not know whether who enter his car, what type of people enter his car, and how the car condition can be. So he will highlight that most of us, or even if he were to own a car himself, then maybe he would not want to go and do Grab. Back to the question of whether to own one or to take a taxi. Of course, most of us subconsciously or psychologically, we will still want to have some ownership, although we are not really owning the entire, we are still having loans to the bank. But ownership in a sense, like I drive the car whenever I want, whichever timing I want. I don't have to consider other factors like midnight charges or time to wait for a cab or duration, or even I have to go to multiple places, then I flag down one after another. So these are things within the mind that I think Weishen and I decided to have a car.
Okay, fair enough. Weishen?
I agree with pretty much everything that Jakes shared, because all the benefits outweigh the negative stuff. I see it more of a tool for me to bring my family to places as opposed to a burden. So definitely the benefit outweighs the cons.
Both of us have kids, so I think like kids, they have a lot of small little things like books, some small little toys that sometimes they want to bring it out and eventually leave it in the car. Every time during the journey, they can like just play around with it. So of course, taking public transport, you won't have all these. If you go out, then some little stuff that are not required can be left in the car while you do your like errands and all. But taking a public transport, then definitely you have to carry every single thing everywhere. I think these are really some minor factors that are affecting, but definitely not significant.
Yeah, I think I agree with Jake's sentiments. For example, today, if you want to go out on a picnic with our family, right? So you have to bring your picnic basket and everything. So then, of course, you have your own space to dump the picnic basket in. Then after which, right, say for example, you want to go off to run some other errands. If you're going to take public transport, right, you imagine you have to carry the picnic basket with you to that supermarket. Then it will be quite a hassle. So you have to then go home before you can head up to another place. But if you have your own transport, you can plan your route as opposed to having to plan one route at a time. So I thought that is very, very convenient.
The control plays a very big part. I think all of us like to have control. We decide things ourselves, we control ourselves, we do whichever is convenient and within our plans.
Yeah, and I think if you have your own car, right, it's also another safe space for you to put your stuff. Like what Jing Kai shared, when you have kids, or even don't say about your kids, in terms of the music you want to play on your car, you can choose whatever you want as opposed to sitting on a Grab or Gojek, right? If they play radio, you have to listen to radio, you can't have your choice of music. So I would say that the car would play as a safe space for us to go to places, and it's a place you can also call it your family place.
Do you guys work in the car, like make phone calls, or let's say now you used to have like appointments on Zoom, but they all like do it in the car also? Is it a space where you can work?
My car is a personal space for me. Sometimes when I have some dispute with my wife, I will go out, then I'll go down to the car and sit for about like a good 2 to 3 hours. After I cool down, give it a thought, think how to settle it, then I go home. Yeah, because I think while we are all confined in a small space, personal space and all these are important as well. So especially working from home a lot. Yeah. So sometimes when we have dispute, because 2, 3 a.m., where can I go? If I go too far, then later something happened to the house or what. Yeah. So I'll just go down, then I'll just sit. Especially when that time they lock down or they close all the coffee shops from dining, then I got nowhere to go. So I go to my car.
What about Weishen?
For me, I like to drive long distances. And I use that time when I drive, right, to make phone calls, to call my clients, to chit chat, so on and so forth. I use that quite a lot to make calls.
Okay.
Being a workplace, I think is quite good as well. Yesterday, actually, I went to Causeway Point and then I saw this new Cube. It's like a on-the-go workstation with those charging point, a very simple table and a chair inside. Yeah. So of course, having a car works like this also. So sometimes on the go, if we need to attend some urgent calls or urgent meeting, then we can just stop aside, open our laptop or iPad to connect and things like that.
Okay, so we have come to our final question of the session. Okay, so what would be your advice for people buying their first car?
For me, I think just 2 simple steps. One, work out your sums. Okay, make sure you are very comfortable with the installment and not forgetting all the maintenance and running costs involved. Secondly, if you want to buy a car, make sure the car work hard for you and not you working hard for your car. So there are instances, right, I see people driving branded cars, but when they go to the petrol station, right, they just pump $10. That I was thinking, why can't they just pump full? Or when you have to pay for parking, right, you'll be complaining about, wow, why is the parking so expensive? Why is the ERP deducting so much from my cash card? So if you're driving or you're owning a car and you're doing all all these complaints, right, then probably you're not suited to purchase a car, and finances probably is still not on your side yet. So I want all the listeners, if you want to own a car, then drive happy. If you're going to be very upset because of the finances, then don't buy a car.
Yeah, so the second point of what Weishen mentioned resonate with me a lot. In terms of having a car, then having the affordability to feed the car. It's just like you have a baby, but then you cannot afford education, cannot afford milk powder, then no purpose of having that. Then you got to find alternative within our means. I think the two of us are in the financial line, which will then make us think whatever that we do has to in return be value for our money or even our resources, which if I were to purchase a car and spend this amount of money, and then in exchange I can save the time which serve more value on other purposes, whether is it work, family, or like personal, then of course it makes sense to purchase a car. But realistically, within your means to be able to afford is really, really very important, because we don't want in a day that you purchase something or you overstretch yourself to purchase just to be in the hype or in your group to make sure you blend in, then it will defeat the purpose, because end up the suffering of all the tedious details of not being able to service the car or having to go and compensate other personal things to feed the car, then it will not be feasible or not be wise to have that process.
Some very wise words from Weishen and Jakes. So basically, don't overspend or scrimp on your essentials just to pay for a car, and make sure that you have done your sums before you purchase a car, because it's a long-term commitment. Buying a car is easy, but maintaining and affording one is the real question that we need to focus on. With that, thanks for listening to us this week. Got a question or topic you'd like to feature on our podcast? We would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed our show, follow us at Aegis Organization on Facebook and Instagram for more updates. Till then, cheers! The statements or opinions expressed on this site are ours and do not reflect the official policy or position of AIA Singapore Private Limited, any other agency, organization, employer, or company.